Don't eat the steak. They know who you are. 7 words, scrawled in blue ink on a folded order slip. And for billionaire CEO Claire Briggs, those words hit harder than any headline ever could. The note stopped her mid-bite, fork suspended in midair, heart pounding beneath her calm exterior. She'd faced hostile takeovers, courtroom ambushes, and public scandals. But this? This wasn't business. This was survival. Across the candlelit dining room, the waiter who'd slip her the note, Richard Avalon, didn't say a word. He just gave a single, subtle nod. And in that silence, Claire understood one thing. Something was terribly wrong inside the Cradle, the luxury restaurant her company quietly owned. She had come here tonight alone, undercover, to test a rumor that someone within her empire was sabotaging her from the inside. But she never imagined she'd uncover a plot meant to destroy her reputation, her company, and maybe even her life. What happened next would expose a web of deceit that reached far beyond a dinner table, a truth buried beneath white tablecloths, polished wine glasses, and billion-dollar lies. Because sometimes, justice doesn't start with a courtroom. It starts with a note. Before we go any further, take a second to like this video and subscribe for more stories that challenge power, stir the soul, and prove that courage doesn't always come with a title. Take a breath, because the next few minutes will change how you see loyalty, privilege, and what happens when the right person refuses to stay silent. This is the story of a billionaire who ordered steak, and the waiter who changed everything. The restaurant was silent, but her mind wasn't. Every sound, the scrape of cutlery, the hush of whispers, felt amplified. Claire Briggs leaned back in her chair, her face unreadable beneath the soft glow of the chandelier. She had built an empire by trusting patterns, not emotions. Yet the note in her hand, that was no coincidence. She folded it once, tucked it beneath her clutch, and smiled faintly at the waiter's retreating figure, as if nothing had happened. But behind that calm expression was the mind of a woman trained to dissect chaos before it struck. Claire Briggs was more than just another billionaire. At 42, she was a self-made titan, the founder and CEO of Briggs Global, a cleantech powerhouse with luxury holdings spread across continents. From Silicon Valley boardrooms to Wall Street panels, she had become the face of modern resilience, a woman who turned glass ceilings into glass floors for others to stand on. But even glass can shatter. Just 2 weeks earlier, Claire received an anonymous message on her private server, one no assistant, no handler, and no PR manager could intercept. It read, "Someone inside your company is selling access. They'll hit you where it hurts, through your own brand." At first, she ignored it. Anonymous warnings weren't new in her world. But then came a second message, one that mentioned a place. The Cradle. Fine dining restaurant in Charleston her company partly owned, famous for its exclusivity, its clientele, and its secrets. It wasn't the kind of place people talked about. It was the kind of place they whispered about. So Claire did what no one expected. She didn't call her head of security. She didn't send her legal team. She went alone. No driver. No security detail. Just her, in a plain black dress and a quiet determination to look her enemies in the eye without them ever realizing who she was. The moment she walked through the Cradle's mahogany doors, she felt it, that subtle shift in air, the way people's eyes lingered just a second too long. She was seated near the kitchen, not the window. A quiet reminder that no matter how powerful a woman becomes, some places are designed to humble you. She didn't correct the hostess. She didn't complain. She just observed. The waiter assigned to her, Richard Avalon, moved with a quiet precision. His posture was straight, his tone polite, but there was something behind his eyes, something that made her pause. He wasn't just serving. He was watching. As she sipped her wine, Claire's mind drifted, not to the food, but to the faces of the men seated in the corner booth. One of them, she realized, worked for her. Ryan Johnson, Regional Operations Director. What was he doing here? Her phone buzzed once in her purse. A message flashed briefly before she swiped it away. Status confirmed. Target arrived. Her throat went dry. She wasn't supposed to see that, but she did. Because sometimes the universe lets the truth slip through the cracks just long enough for you to catch it. The steak arrived, plated perfectly under a silver dome. Richard set it down gently, his hand steady, but his eyes told another story. Something was wrong. And when he slipped that folded note under her napkin, Claire's instincts, the same instincts that built her empire, came alive. She smiled at him politely. Then, without saying a word, she whispered to herself, "Let's see who's watching." That's when she noticed it. A small lens tucked behind a floral centerpiece. A camera, recording her table. And the reflection in the glass pane beside it? A man in a dark suit, seated at the bar, pretending to read a menu but stealing glances every few seconds. That man was Ryan Johnson. Claire calmly placed her fork down, wiped her mouth, and stood. Her voice was steady when she spoke to the hostess. "Excuse me. Restroom." The hostess nodded and gestured down the corridor. But Claire didn't go to the restroom. She kept walking, past the powder room, past the framed awards, until she reached a hallway marked staff only. From behind the door, she heard voices. One of them, unmistakably Ryan's, and another, male, older, distant, speaking through a phone speaker. "Ryan, she's here. Table 7. Don't worry, she ordered it. Voice good. Just make sure she eats it. I want the recording before morning." Her pulse quickened. The note. The cameras. The whispers. This wasn't about bad food or bad service. This was about her. Someone wasn't just sabotaging her reputation. They were staging it. Before she could step back, the door creaked open. Ryan froze mid-sentence, phone still in hand. His expression shifted from shock to panic in a single heartbeat. "Ms. Briggs," he stammered. And in that instant, she realized he knew exactly who she was. Claire didn't flinch. She looked him dead in the eyes and said, "You should have picked a quieter restaurant." Then she turned and walked away, straight toward the kitchen, straight toward the man who'd warned her. Because something told her Richard Avalon wasn't just a waiter tonight. He was the only person left she could trust. Richard Avalon moved like a shadow through the cradle, unnoticed, unbothered, unseen. At 29, he'd learned to survive by blending in, by perfecting the kind of silence that kept him both invisible and safe. But lately, silence had started to taste like guilt. For weeks, Richard had seen things that didn't sit right. Unusual deliveries. Late-night closed-door meetings. Kitchen cameras suddenly offline. And a small, unmarked silver case that the chef stored under lock and key. He wasn't supposed to know about any of it. But when you've worked 5 years in one place, you start to read patterns the way others read faces. Then came the night 3 days ago. He was cleaning tables when he heard his manager, Ryan Johnson, talking near the back corridor. Ryan wasn't alone. A man in a charcoal suit stood beside him, his tone sharp, businesslike. "Tomorrow night," Ryan said. "She's coming. You know what to do." "And the footage?" the man asked. "We'll have it ready." The man left without paying. That's when Richard's chest tightened. He didn't know who she was, not until he saw the reservation list the next morning. Claire Briggs. He recognized the name instantly. The CEO of Briggs Global. His employer's employer. And suddenly, everything made sense. That silver case. The off-camera prep. The sudden tension in the kitchen. They weren't serving dinner tomorrow night. They were staging a show. Richard had seen injustice before, but this was different. This was deliberate, calculated, cruel. He couldn't stop the plan, not directly, but he could warn her. So, when she ordered the steak, he did the only thing that felt right. He tore a blank order slip, grabbed a pen, and wrote the words that might cost him his job, or save a life. "Don't eat the steak. They know who you are." Then he slipped it under her napkin, hoping she would understand, and praying that he wouldn't regret it. Claire's instincts screamed louder than reason. Everything around her, the music, the laughter, the wine, began to distort into background noise. She replayed the note in her mind, watching Ryan at the bar, catching the reflection of his watch as it glinted under the chandelier. He was pretending to check his phone, but his eyes never left her table. The waiter's warning wasn't paranoia, it was protection. Claire glanced toward the kitchen, catching a glimpse of a camera hidden near the molding. Her company's restaurants had surveillance systems for quality control, but she knew that angle wasn't company standard. Someone had installed it privately. She smiled faintly, composed, and lifted her glass of wine. To anyone watching, she looked like a woman enjoying a quiet dinner. But beneath the table, her hand was already on her phone, typing a single message to her private investigator in New York. Pull digital access logs for the cradle. Tonight. Quietly. She slid her phone back into her clutch. Then she saw him, Richard, standing at the service door, watching her table again. Their eyes met, and in that brief exchange, she saw what he couldn't say aloud. Fear. Urgency. Truth. She rose from her seat, napkin in hand, and headed toward the back hallway, where she'd heard Ryan before. The corridor was dimly lit. Voices echoed softly from behind the door marked manager's office. She leaned in. Ryan's voice. She's here. Table 7. Don't worry, she ordered it. Distorted voice. Good. Make sure she eats it. I want the clip before morning. Her heart pounded. They weren't trying to poison her. They were setting her up. Claire pushed the door open. Ryan froze mid-call, phone still at his ear. Ms. Briggs, he stammered. Her tone was icy calm. You should choose your dinner conversations more carefully, Ryan. He opened his mouth to explain, but she'd already turned away, walking straight toward the kitchen, and straight toward the man who had warned her. The kitchen smelled of garlic and fear. Chefs froze mid-motion as Claire entered, the weight of authority trailing behind her like static in the air. Richard stood near the prep table, his apron dusted with flour, eyes darting between her and the others. You shouldn't be here, he whispered. Neither should they, she replied. He hesitated, then slipped a small flash drive from his pocket. I copied the real camera feeds before Ryan cut them. You need to see this. In her car moments later, Claire plugged the drive into her phone. The footage was grainy but clear. Ryan and the head chef stood over her steak, talking into a laptop camera. A distorted voice said, Make sure she eats it. She'll think it's dinner. But by tomorrow, the video will be everywhere. CEO eats contaminated food in her own restaurant. That's all we'll need. The voice, calm, commanding, belonged to someone she knew. Marcus Vell, her chief operating officer, her friend. The betrayal hit like ice. He wasn't after money, he was after power. He wanted her out before the merger vote next week. Claire exhaled slowly. So that's your game, she murmured. Then she picked up her phone. Activate Protocol Echo, she said. Now. 15 minutes later, black SUVs rolled to a silent stop outside the cradle. Customers turned as men in dark suits entered the dining room. No badges, no shouting, just quiet authority. Ryan's face drained of color when they reached his table. The head chef tried to slip toward the back door, but Richard stepped in his way, blocking the exit. Claire walked back in calmly, her presence commanding the room. Mr. Johnson, she said, thank you for your hospitality. My legal team will handle the check. Ryan tried to speak, but his voice cracked. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, she cut him off. And so will the police. Within minutes, Ryan and the chef were escorted out. The diners whispered. Phones recorded. And for the first time all evening, Claire let herself breathe. Richard stood near the corner, unsure whether to speak. She turned to him and said softly, You trusted your gut. Most people don't. He looked down. I just did what was right. That's exactly what makes you different, she replied. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. Billionaire CEO exposes corporate espionage in her own company. Briggs COO arrested for attempted corporate sabotage. Marcus Vell's plan had crumbled overnight. The leaked footage, the tampered stake, the hidden cameras, all traced back to him. That afternoon, Claire stood on the front steps of the cradle, flanked by reporters. Cameras flashed, microphones raised, but her voice remained steady. This wasn't a bad meal. It was a broken system, and we are rebuilding it from the inside out. She gestured to the man standing beside her, Richard Avalon, now wearing a tailored blazer. This man showed more integrity in one night than some executives show in a lifetime. From this day forward, he'll serve as the head of ethics and operations for Briggs Global. Applause filled the air. Richard didn't smile, but the quiet pride in his eyes said everything. The same restaurant that once hid corruption had become the birthplace of reform. And Claire? She didn't just save her empire. She rewrote its values. 2 weeks later, the cradle reopened. The walls were repainted, the portraits replaced. No more Confederate generals or hollow awards. Now, the decor honored local heroes, community leaders, and black pioneers from Charleston's past. Richard's new office sat where Ryan's used to. The same desk, but a new mission: transparency. Every day, he reviewed new hiring policies, diversity initiatives, and anonymous employee reports. He no longer wore a waiter's apron, but he hadn't forgotten what it felt like to carry one. That morning, Claire stopped by his office. "You've done well," she said. He smiled faintly. "I just told the truth." "That's what saves companies," she replied. "Not profits. Not press. Truth." They stood in silence, the weight of everything unspoken between them. As Claire turned to leave, Richard glanced at the framed note on his wall, the same folded order slip she'd handed back to him that night. In blue ink, the words still glared back at him. "Don't eat the steak. They know who you are." He kept it as a reminder that courage often begins quietly, and that the smallest act of honesty can shake the tallest empire. It wasn't a police raid that saved Claire Briggs. It wasn't lawyers or headlines. It was a handwritten note, a moment of courage from a man who refused to stay silent. Because sometimes justice doesn't start in a courtroom. Sometimes it starts with a waiter and a folded piece of paper that changes everything.